Hey everyone, this is Disc Junkie and welcome to the Dailies. So today I thought we would talk about Alien 3, but I don't want to talk about any old version of Alien 3. I want to talk about the brand new fan edit legacy cut. And so in order to understand what the legacy cut is and why there was a demand and a reason behind making this, we have to take a brief look at the history of Alien 3. And so back in the early 1990s when this movie was in the making, there were a whole lot of issues going on behind the scenes. And this primarily stemmed from the fact that the studio, which was 20th Century Fox, was primarily focused on just putting out the next Alien movie. I mean, if you remember back in 1986 when James Cameron directed Aliens, this was essentially like a super smash hit. Everybody loved it. This also put a whole lot of pressure on the studio, it put a whole lot of pressure on the directors and basically anyone involved in wanting to put out Alien 3 because, I mean, how are you gonna follow Aliens? It was literally the perfect sequel. The studio was very sort of adamant about essentially setting a premiere date. Get this movie done, and there wasn't really too much respect paid to the director or their visions or the writers or whatever. It was mostly about the money. And basically, if you want to boil it down to what these sort of issues eventually became, well, I mean, there is a whole lot of things going on. They had up to 9 writers working on the script. We had people like Rennie Harlin connected to this project. We had Vincent Ward. David Twohy was involved at one point. Whole lot of different writers that has sort of been brought on board, then been fired or left the project because they had personal issues with the studio and didn't get along. And so what you get is like this Frankenstein of a script. And while this was going on, the studio was already hard at work in regards to building sets. So there was all this stuff being made for a whole lot of money, sort of taken from the budget, and then there wasn't really a finished script that was sort of correlating with the stuff that was already built. And on top of this, we had the fact that there were multiple directors being attached to the movie. Once again, here we also had Rennie Harland being considered as a director. We had Vincent Ward, who also was one of the people who worked on the script. Both of these people were either fired or they left the project because they didn't agree with the studio. And so eventually David Fincher was brought on board. And you probably all know the name David Fincher. He has become famed for making movies like Seven and Fight Club, and he is essentially like one of the top directors working in Hollywood today. This was actually his first feature-length debut. He has not directed a feature film before this. The Alien franchise has always been sort of famed for wanting to bring new directors to direct each sequel, which is also what makes each Alien movie very different and makes them stand out. And I think that is a very cool concept. Once he was brought on board and he started to try and working with the studio, it feels like he quickly realized that the studio didn't really let him do what he wanted to do. He wasn't really allowed to create his own vision of this movie. And this is sort of where the problems start. So here we had David, who had to brought onto a project. This is his first time movie. He doesn't even have a complete script at this point. And so he's constantly coming into work, sort of asking the studio, like, I want to do this. And they're telling him, no, you can't do this. That's too expensive. David Fincher had to go through a nightmare to make this movie. And once the movie eventually finished, David Fincher essentially disowned the whole thing. And he hardly makes any interviews about it. And in the very few statements that he has made about the movie, he's been quoted as saying, as no one hated this movie more than me. This was literally sort of a career-ending type of event for him. He even left the movie before it was finished. He didn't take part in the final edits of the movie. He did make like a first cut, like a director's cut, and this was rejected by the studio. Then they essentially made a cut themselves, like a studio cut, and this is what was released as the theatrical cut. And the movie didn't do very well, and basically this might have been the end of Fincher's career. But what saved him to a large extent was the fact that Sigourney Weaver, who's the main star of the movie obviously, she was very open and very angry talking to the media and did interviews and stuff where she essentially backed Fincher, saying that, you know, he didn't get the support from the studio that he needed and that, you know, this could have been a great movie, but he wasn't allowed to do what he wanted. And also, the producer, I think his name is Arnold Kopelson, he saw something in David and later offered him the project of Seven. So they collaborated on Seven, and this was essentially the movie, which was made in 1995, that sort of saved David's career. Now, if you want to know more about this, I would highly advise you to watch the making of documentary on Alien 3 that was released in the Alien Quadrilogy box set. But ironically, the version that first appeared on the DVD box set of Alien, the Quadrilogy, this is actually a censored version of the making of documentary. The documentary is called Wreckage and Rape, the Making of Alien 3. Or at least this was the original title, because when this was released, the studio was very sort of critical about the fact that a lot of the cast and crew were very open about what they thought about the production and how the studio wasn't very nice to Fincher. And so, yeah, the studio decided to censor the making of because they didn't like what was being said about them. Talk about the irony. There are essentially a feature-length making of for all the movies. So, I mean, when I first got this box set, I thought this was like the greatest thing ever made in terms of special features. And I still think this is a milestone in making of documentaries and special features. If you want to watch the making of for Alien 3, I would highly advise you not to watch the DVD version. Instead, you will want to pick up the Alien Anthology on Blu-ray. I got a copy right here behind me. This has the fully uncensored, uncut version of the making of Alien 3. And I think it adds something like 20 minutes. On the DVD, the title is even changed. So there it's called Wreckage and Rage, not Wreckage and Rape, which actually appears on the Blu-ray version. At some point, David Fincher sort of spoke out about his experience on the film and essentially told people that he felt like he was getting raped by the studio every day. I think that might be part of why the studio wanted the word rape removed from the title. But in honesty, I don't think that has anything to do with it, because Wreckage and Rape actually relates to a scene in the movie. This also relates to a title of a track on the soundtrack, which actually is Wreckage and Rape. So there wasn't really a correlation between what was going on with Fincher, but I think the studio sort of maybe thought that this was some sort of nudge towards that. I don't know. So I'm rambling now, but I really want to talk to you about the Legacy Cut. And so the Legacy Cut is a fan edit, it's a fan project that's been in the work for the last 5 years, and it just got released now in 2025. And so basically there's a couple of fans, and they decide that they want to give Alien 3 the proper sort of after production sort of work on it. I mean, they want to turn this movie in to the best version of the movie it can be. They want to give it the attention that it didn't get. Because like I said, Alien 3 was a movie where the director walked off the project. He wasn't even a part of the final edit of the movie. And you might also know that on the Alien Quadrilogy box set and in the Anthology box set, there is something known as the assembly cut. When they were making these box sets, they reached out to all the directors and asked them, will you make a director's cut of your own movie? And everyone said yes to this, except for Fincher. They did reach out to him, but he eventually said no and gave his blessing to Charles de Los Rica, who's a really big fan and a very sort of creative mind. He also worked on the making of documentaries. That's all his stuff. This is vastly different to the theatrical version. It adds some of the stuff back that David Fincher originally wanted to do, that was in his sort of work print cut originally. And so what the Legacy Cut tries to do is to combine various sort of things from the assembly cut and theatrical cut to sort of take the best of both worlds. I really like the dog burster scene, the fact that the dog is the host for the alien. I also like the ending where you have Ripley falling into the like the lava or the furnace thingy, and there's a chest burster coming out of the chest. Both of these things were changed for the assembly cut. There's a lot of little things like that which were cool to see in an alternate version, but ultimately, I don't know, I like stuff from both versions. So for me personally, I thought that a Legacy Cut or a new version combining these versions was actually something really interesting. And it basically all started with a group of people who wanted to improve on the special effects for this movie. And I can understand it, because the biggest problems for most people when they talk about Alien 3, and the reason for why people really look down on it, is the special effects. Look at Aliens and Alien, these were very much sort of practical effects. We weren't really working with computer animation and stuff like that. And Alien 3 was very much on the breaking point, which is also part of why this might not look perfect all the time, because it is very early days for them. They wanted to improve on the special effects for the legacy cut, and they, for one thing, cleaned up the colors, because there are a lot of issues with coloring on the special effects. Like the alien looks very sort of different in color and doesn't blend well with the background. And there's even some scenes where they have literally taken the alien out of the frame and replaced it with their own alien special effects. They're actually using like a action figure to do stuff, because the original effects looked so bad, like just a blur, the alien jumping across the screen. If you want to know more about this, you should definitely check out the official Legacy Cut website, which is a34k.net. And the reason why it's called A34K is because this is also Alien 3 in 4K. This is literally the 4K premiere of Alien 3. Not an official release by any studio. No, this is a fan-made 4K upscale of the movie. We have never seen Alien 3 in 4K until today. I watched this a few weeks ago when it came out, and I have to say that I am stunned as to how great this movie looked. I've always had issues with Alien 3. I never really thought it was as good, but I really did love it. I also felt like a bit of a guilty pleasure, because it feels like, you know, you watch and you think like, the effects don't look that good, I know, and you're trying to explain to people why this is such an important and great movie. There is a masterpiece here. It just never got the attention that it deserved. But now it has. After it was done, I just felt like this is the definitive version of Alien 3, or at least the best version that exists to date. And when I'm rewatching it next time, I will definitely go back to the Legacy Cut, because this is such an improvement on both the assembly cut and the theatrical cut. They fix all of the special effects. Everything looks great. The 4K upscale nailed it. It looks awesome. Also, what I think is really cool is that they actually changed the story quite a bit. Based on the whole thing with like the dog being the host in the theatrical cut and the ox being the host in the other one, this also creates some continuity issues, because it's like there's several new scenes with the ox which were in the assembly cut, and the scenes themselves are really cool. They're not really part of like the birthing process or birthing scenes. They're essentially just establishing shots. But this is actually kept in there. I just think that it's perfect. I didn't have any issues with this movie. I think they fixed everything that needed to be fixed. If you want to go into this movie and get the full scope, I would advise you to read up on the movie on the website, because they do these really great sort of before and after shots and really talk about all of the choices they made and how they improved on the movie. It's just a really good sort of rundown of things, and I would love to see a making of on the Legacy Cut. That would be really interesting. I really hope that people take this movie to heart and decide to give it another chance, because there is an absolute masterpiece in this movie. And I think nowadays, when David Fincher is such a respected and good director, it really deserves to go back and watch his directorial debut, because there is something really good there. And I always thought this was the perfect ending to the Alien saga, or at least as far as Ripley goes, because Alien Resurrection, it's not good. I mean, look at Alien 3 and you will see how well that has aged, but look at Alien Resurrection and it's like, I can't believe how bad that movie actually is. I don't know how many years it will be until I rewatch Alien Resurrection, but I will rewatch Alien 3 any night of the fucking week, because it's that good, and with the Legacy Cut, it's even better. Just go to the website, download this movie, rewatch Alien 3, and just, you know, take pleasure in the fact that some fans were good enough to create this, because it is an amazing fan edit and literally just the best fan production I've ever seen. I want to say thank you very much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed it, and as usual, hope to see you all next time.